sing from. You can always call this place home. No matter where you've been or what you've done. We pray we were required to recite a scripture. I wasn't terribly fond of my grandfather. He was a hard man. And so I would figure out ways that I could get under his skin. So I realized that this text, John the 11th chapter and the 35th verse, is the shortest verse in the Bible. And it simply reads, Jesus wept. And I used to make my granddaddy mad. But this is actually a sermon he used to preach, and I shall attempt to do some service to it. They acknowledged the darkness, but they didn't let the darkness have the last word. Lily in the valley, water in dry places. A doctor in a sick room, a lawyer in a courtroom, a friend to the friendless, a mother to the motherless. They always told the truth about the darkness, but they never let the darkness have the last word. And if I have anything to say to you this morning, it is I want to give you simply permission to grieve. Permission to have your heart broken and to be disappointed. Because in the context of our tradition is that we name that darkness, we weep and we cry and we moan, but we know that this joy that we have, the world didn't give it to them. Joy is different than happiness. Happiness is like the word fun. These are words that are creations of modernity. These are new words in the human experience. Joy is something that does not depend on what is happening around us. It manifests itself in spite of the circumstances. Right. So joy. And so then in the scripture, as we attempt to find our footing ashore here in the biblical text, in the scripture it says that word had been sent to Jesus that is the one he had loved. The beloved is ill. Now the interesting thing about what beloved signifies is not only relationships, that Jesus' relationship to Lazarus, but it also signifies how other people view Lazarus. Lazarus is viewed as beloved by someone who is important. There are some assumptions that people in the community make about Lazarus, that Lazarus has a certain kind of visibility. People know his name because of his proximity to someone. And so Lazarus' relationship in the community, I suspect in my own sanctified imagination. While he is beloved by Jesus, he's often hated by the folks who are around him because of his relationship to Jesus. But the scripture says Lazarus dies. And my theology can't accommodate. And I watched Heather Heyer take her last breath. And so I was done. I was like, all right, I quit. I retired. I'm retiring from the movement. I'm just going to do music. And then I get home. And I don't have a booking agent because the industry doesn't know what to do with me. So I sit for 3 months. No gigs coming in. And I'm drowning in debt from the first record. And I'm like, God, I watched this girl take her last breath. I've seen the kind of hate that I've never seen before in my life. And I just want to sing some songs. And you haven't shown up. If it had been in the nick of time, I could have got that. And so I'm sitting there for 3 months wondering, has my living been in vain?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so it seems like I can hear chariots in the night coming for me, and that I am not long for this world. And so I say I am done. So I start making my way to my basement, because I'm calling it quits. And every step I make down those steps, I hear the promises of my grandmother, and I hear the promises of Scripture, and I just don't believe them anymore. I'm done. Here in the text, Jesus does not show up after. Not only did he love Lazarus, but in the text, it mentions Martha and Mary, and there's an instance in Scripture where Martha has broken out perfume and rubbed it on Jesus' feet. And Jesus blesses her when everybody else in the room has cursed her. So not only did Jesus love Lazarus, his sister had offered up in sacrifice that Jesus had blessed her for. And so by the time Jesus shows up, she sees him and she runs out and she meets him. And she says, if you would have been here. If you would have been here. If all of this stuff that we claim to believe in to be true. If you would have been here, Michael Brown wouldn't have laid in the street for 4.5 hours. If you would have been here. If you would have been here, Philando Castile would be alive. Sandra Bland would be alive. India Clark would be alive. Kiki Haring would be alive. If you would have been here, Donald Trump would not be in office. If you would have been here. She's furious. And the sonic landscape around her is that they've begun the death ritual. That there's weeping and gnashing and the renting of their cloth, and the minor chords of their instrumentality are being played, and people are preparing meals. And Jesus does this real interesting thing. He didn't call for a task force. No committee. No study. He didn't ask, well, what was going on and what business did he have doing there at that time of night anyway. Jesus just asked, where have you laid him? And this is what I like about the King James Version, which and you know, I know many of us have been to seminary, it's not that accurate, but I like it. I like this poetry. And my granddaddy say it was written with the very finger of God. But in the King James Version, it says, well, surely, they respond to Jesus wherever he laid him, they said, surely he stinketh. That's the kind of faith I need to go where it stinks. Where it is surely dead. That's we need to be with each other. When we are surely dead, when we surely stinketh, can we go there with one another? Being a bit visible much of my life is not all that it's cracked up to be. And I often say, if I'm successful for the black community, we're in a lot more trouble than I think we in. But going to where it surely stinketh is not about success, it's about faithfulness. And Leslie, faithfulness is not the same thing as success. Because for the pastors in the room, you know you can do everything you're supposed to do and it don't turn out right. You can pray for a family, be there, support them in every way you can. And all you have left is that you were faithful to them. For those who work with queer kids and we struggle to keep them in and out of the sex trade, we can give them all the skills, all the resources, everything that they need. And they can make decisions that we do not agree with. You can love your denomination and be faithful and pray and work with white folks and try to help them understand the level of struggle that you engage in as a person of color inside of it. And then they still do dumb stuff. Amen. You know, they talk about, Lena and them taught me this new word, the microaggressions, and I kept asking them what that was. I said, I don't really understand what that means. I was like, oh, that's white folks being white folks. That's all. They gonna clap on 1 and 3, and they gonna get on your nerves. You can lose the battle and still be faithful, because part of what our struggle is in this community is to go where it stinks. Be in that place with one another. And so it says in the Bible that Jesus looked, and when he arrives at the grave, that he weeps first. He looks at it and he weeps. And then according to Christian mythos, Jesus is the Son of God, or is God in the flesh. And so this powerful story in the myth that God is weeping, that the creator of the sun, moon, and stars is weeping for Lazarus. And then after he weeps, he looks up and he prays and says that they might believe. You see, part of what our responsibility in this community is that, and I'm not talking about redemptive suffering. I'm not making a claim, particularly for the black women and the queer folk in the room, I'm not making a claim about you being long-suffering in order that, because Jesus was long. That's not what I'm saying. Right. What I am saying is that it is evident that black people will suffer. And that in the midst of that, when we maintain a level of dignity and decency and we come out on the other side, there is someone who is watching us, who will gain strength and capacity because we went through it. Because we endured. That somehow, some way, one of the greatest lessons that I've learned from elders is not their victories, but their defeats. The mistakes that they're made. Now, boy, don't you do that now. Because I did that. Or I've been through that. Or a person like myself, I sometimes don't believe fat meat is greasy. Well. So I got to learn it myself.
Learn lessons. Sticks over and talk lessons.
Over and over again sometimes. Right? But part of living is going to the place that it stinks. But in the midst of that, being reminded, as our foreparents reminded us, that this joy, with tears rolling down our face, we have smiles on them, because we know this joy, no matter what they do over there in Boston, this joy that Blue has. The world didn't give it. The world, that if they decide that they will take all the money away, what you have, they can't take that away. And then part of it, you remember, we began with this understanding. So after Lazarus is healed, he comes out of the grave. And then the thing that Jesus is interesting, Jesus says, he says, take the death clothes off of him. That part of our responsibility is to be reminded the ways in which we are all surrounded by the death-dealing empire, and we all have the capacity to reproduce the very things that we say we want to be free from. Oh, my grandmama said it like this. She said, you can't live in a whorehouse and not turn a trick. And she says, if you give people chitlin choices, they'll make funky decisions. Meaning that we all are guilt, that we all have the capacity to stinketh. And we just need to be in a community of folks who will love us through it and care for us. But it begins with our capacity to grieve. But we grieve in joy. For weeping may endure for a night, but joy in the morning. And there's an old song we used to sing, I'm so glad the trouble don't last always. Will you sing with me now? I believe love,